So for our last session, we want to talk about enterprise security account management models, in particular Active Directory. And we want to take a minute to review Kerberos as a special topic. But once we set the stage within Active Directory, there are some powerful security measures that become possible that can protect the operating system enterprise-wide. So the Active Directory model is a way to extend the Windows operating system collectively so that institutional controls are hardwired into the kernel level. This is very powerful if it's done properly. One of the most important things it allows is to automate. You know, we've talked about Windows software update services, haven't we? Didn't we introduce Windows software update services?
Yes.
And so you can basically drive a whole series of, and we talked about how managed networks allow you to pin to a DHCP server, and the DHCP server allows you to define specifics within your networking environment, right? We did talk about that. And then how it'll pin to a specific DNS server, and then from there you have Active Directory. So there's like 4 steps of the process. Your connected client picks up network addresses and criteria to include where it's going to go for the DHCP assignment. The assignment includes additional criteria that pin down, okay, what kind of DNS server you're going to use, what kinds of network restrictions you might have, like not being able to use NetBIOS. Does this ring a bell at all? Yes.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that earlier.
Okay. All right. And when you add GPOs, when you have Active Directory in place and it's riding on top of that, so across this lower level of network layer where the ARP and IP helper, DHCP, DNS, and LDAP and Kerberos are, above that is the Active Directory environment, and that Active Directory environment allows you to enforce policies on the local devices and systems. And one of these includes startup scripts, right? So login scripts. And they learned some years ago that antivirus is obsolete. And so to make a long story short, if we talk about system security, there's this sense that as long as you have a firewall and antivirus, you're good to go. And about 5 years ago, they found out that antivirus is obsolete. So when I say some years ago, I'm talking back in the early 2013, 2014, a number of leading industry cybersecurity experts said, hey, this stuff really doesn't work anymore. That's because there's so many different and new versions of malware flooding networks on a daily basis that antivirus really can't keep up with it. Now, that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Everybody said, oh, well, okay, so we'll get rid of antivirus. No, that's not really the answer. But one answer that people came up with is something called application whitelisting. Simply put, and it's called, in the Microsoft environment, this is called App Locker. So if you have group policy objects, you can basically say, okay, on our workstations, you can only run Chrome, Microsoft Office, and take your pick, a couple of Adobe Acrobat. You can basically whitelist applications so that those are the only software applications that will run on a system. You can also enforce the installation of integrity tools like Bit9. So Bit9 takes a hash of your system and it finds out that of the authorized applications that are running on your system, which have been modified recently. So Bit9 kind of works in complement with application whitelisting, and Bit9 actually has its own application whitelisting enforcement capabilities. Okay. The important point to understand is that you can define policy criteria. We talked earlier about identity account management, IAM, and we said there were two main components of IAM in our last module. And within account management was a specialty area called privileged account management. Does anyone remember a question about PAM? PAM?
I remember that PAM was considered a subset of SAM, security account management, which itself is a subset of IAM, which is something says IAM, this identity account management.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yes. Well, let's say you have a privileged account, like a domain administrative account, or an account that allows someone to manage an entire organizational unit, like research and development or finance, right? In a domain, in Active Directory domains, you can define organizational units and then put accounts in charge of those organizational units, and those are privileged accounts. How do you enforce different passwords? One of the things that I need your help to remember, I want to revisit Kerberos and the 15 character or greater password rule, okay? So that's one thing that that I wanted to spend a little time getting deeper into. But before we got too far along in the rest of the material, I wanted to talk about what you can expect for your solution. You're going to build your own DHCP server and your own DNS server. And I want you to set up a best practices DNS and DHCP server for your solution. Resilient infrastructure via DHCP and DNS. And I want you to notice that there's an assignment that's due by 1 May that's worth 3 points. So last week, this was worth 2 points. And if anyone needs me to extend this deadline, I can extend this out this week. But we're going to talk about setting up a virtual machine and adding network roles to a virtual machine, and that needs to be done by the end of this week. So if we look at the calendar, 1 May is Saturday. And so I just said, okay, by midnight, 1 minute before midnight on Saturday night, you need to have the virtual machine created. And then you're going to watch a video. This is going to be a very quick, very efficient video. It'll take you 20 minutes to watch. It'll take you about 30 minutes to perform the steps. So we're not talking about a huge investment of time. I understand that we're down to the wire here. Today is our last class. Tomorrow you have last classes in other courses, and then we have a study day on Wednesday. And then we have days off that are defined for Carnival over on St. Thomas, correct? Correct?
I can't remember when Carnival is. I think I thought they canceled Carnival, that they might be having it. I haven't even checked.
They did, but the university did not cancel the days off that were defined for students for Carnival. We don't have classes on the 29th and the 30th. We do not have classes the rest of this week. So we don't have class on 29 and 30 because of Carnival on St. Thomas. And we can't penalize Crucian students because they don't live on St. Thomas. And so what I'm telling you is that you have some runway here, right? And you could easily complete both 3.2 assignment and the 3.3 solution by the end of this week. But the assignment has to be done before the solution because you're setting the stage for the solution. Okay. So what are you doing for your assignment? We talked about how having a managed network is critically important and how you need to buy a managed switch. And then there are some other pieces. And if you have something as simple as a virtual machine running in the background, you have everything you need to control your environment so that all the solutions, all the systems and devices are secured. And essentially what we want you to do is to build a virtual machine using your own laptop. And we want you to use VirtualBox. Okay. Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Does everybody have the capacity to run VirtualBox on their laptop?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, sure.
Does everybody have a laptop that has at least 8 gigs of RAM?
For me, yes, I have.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
good.
sure.
Amaya, how about you?
Yes.
Good. How about 36 gigs of free storage space? Please tell me you have 36 gigs of, or you can run disk cleanup and defrag and get 36 gigs of storage space. Does everybody have 36 gigs of storage space?
Yes, I have.
Yes.
Perfect. And if you don't, then putting some videos and movies and pictures on a thumb drive might do the trick. But does everybody have a copy of the Windows Server ISO from the Microsoft website on our My Campus portal?
Yes.
Okay. David, do you know what I'm talking about?
For me, I have it running on my laptop.
Perfect. Amaya, do you have a copy?
Yes.
Okay. David, have you ever?
I don't think I have a copy of that. I haven't heard of it. I've barely heard of it.
Okay.
It's in the My Campus?
I'm going to show you right now. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the cool part of this is you have access to free Microsoft software on our campus portal because you're a student. And if you go down to the Microsoft software download, right? All right, can you see this on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, and you click on this, and then you sign in. It's going to redirect you. It may ask you to put in an email address. You need to put in your UVI student's email address, right? See how this is asking for my email?
Right.
So the catch is with students, if we don't put in students plural, then it barfs on them. As soon as I do this, it's going to take you back to the My Campus login, right? And then it'll prompt you again for your 9000 number, or it'll just give you this prompt. And then once inside here, you're going to select the software downloads the software under learning resources, software option. And my heart just stopped for a second when it said nothing. What a horrible thing. All right, so here's data center. And here's 2019 standard server. This is the same ISO, but it's going to be a different activation code. So if you download one of these ISOs, David, you click on
Right.
this. When you generate a URL, it's going to give you a specific URL to click to download the ISO. And I want you to capture both keys. This is important because if you've used one of your licenses before, the other one is still available. What am I saying? In a previous course, if you used your data center license key to install, then you could use your standard license key to install. Okay? But you're going to get both keys for both versions of the software. This key is going to be different than the data center key. You want to copy and paste both of those. So you could use either of those if required. You may not, in your case, David, because you haven't downloaded this, you're probably just going to be fine downloading the standard key and the ISO. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so you're going to use that to create your hard disk. And what's important to understand about the hard disk is that you have 4 gigs of RAM, you have 36 gigs of hard disk space, and when you create the hard disk, you want to select the fixed option. I'll show you what that means in just a minute. You're going to want to select bridged adapter because you want your virtual machine to have the same, you want it to independently grab an IP from your internet service provider, just the same as any other device or client on your home network, okay?
Okay.
All right, so bridged, remember bridged. It's going to be default, it's going to default to NAT, but you want to change this to bridged. When I say a fixed, like let's say I want to create a new machine. I'm going to create a new machine, and let's pretend I'm just going to call this test, right? Oh, another thing that you want to do, David, is you want to make sure that the machine folder on your preferences, when your preferences, you want to make sure that where the virtual machines are stored, they're stored in a separate directory that is not associated with your My Documents folder. Some My Documents folders are cloud-based, meaning they're stored out in OneDrive. You don't want to park a virtual machine in OneDrive. Just it takes forever. It'll never work. So you want to set this up in your preferences, okay?
Okay.
All right. And then when we're talking about creating a new machine, and you go ahead and select Windows 2019, and you have 4096 with memory. You're going to create a virtual hard disk. It's going to be a VDI, except don't use VHD, just use VDI, but change it to fixed instead of dynamic and make it 36 gigs large. Or if you have more space and you have more breathing room, 52. You know, if you have plenty of space, give it 52. It's just better if it has more breathing. You can, the least you can do is 36, okay? And then when you click create, it's going to dedicate those 36. It's often helpful to run, to optimize your laptop before you build a virtual machine. I have a video in case you're interested. I can send you a link to the video. Does anybody have any questions about what we're talking about for this virtual machine build?
Now, other than that, you should send me a link to the video, but I probably wouldn't need it badly. Yeah, for optimizing, just mean a disk cleanup, then a disk defragmenter and a restart.
Pretty much, yeah. After you do your updates, you're going to do a disk cleanup and defrag. That's right. That's correct. Okay, now let's talk about what you're going to do with the machine, when you get it up on the screen, you'll be able to, you'll see Server Manager when the machine starts. You're going to use the desktop experience version of the software. You do not want to install the plain version of the server software. You want the server software that has a graphical user environment. So you're gonna select the desktop experience version. And then when you get inside of it, you're gonna see Server Manager. The first thing that's gonna come up on the screen is Server Manager. And from the tools option, you can select DNS and DHCP after you install those roles. But on the dashboard, you're going to add a role and a feature, and you're going to install DNS and DHCP. Okay? So you're going to install both of those roles on your server, and that's what you have to do for the assignment. So this screen right here is really all I need. Now, there's one other thing that you usually do when you're setting up a server. You give it a dedicated name, and you give it a dedicated IP address. You'll see an option for other servers or local server. And if you click on that, it'll show the local IP address and the name. I'm using a core version, server core version of the operating system, but you'll see I've given it a standard name. And it has a fixed IP address, a static IP address, an unchanging IP address. That's important. Now, how do you do that in your home environment? You're going to open up your wireless access router. Does everyone have access to their wireless access router? Does everyone, Amaya, do you have access to your wireless router?
I'm not too sure. I haven't tried it yet.
Okay, you're going to want to try it, and then here's where you want to go. I'll show you. Normally, a wireless access router in your house, you go to the LAN section of the configuration, right? And there's going to be an option for DHCP. So your wireless router is a DHCP server itself. The only problem is that this DHCP server isn't industrial strength. It's not professional grade. And it's going to step on your own machine if you don't cull down or limit the pool of addresses that it assigns. Okay. So when you're putting a static address on your DHCP server, you only want your wireless router to provide like 50 addresses or 20 addresses. And on this screen, you see that my own home router only issues 20 randomly assigned addresses. Okay. I can pick a static address that's outside that range to assign permanently to my virtual machine. So I could pick 31 or 51 in this case. If your wireless router shows 2 to 254, you need to cut it down to like 2 to 51 or make it 2 to 50, right? I mean, how many people have 48 wireless devices they need to serve in their home environment? That's just insane, right? So if you had 2 to 50, your DHCP server that you're creating for this assignment and solution could have a fixed address of 51. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? I can help you assess on your own home system. We can share a screen, but the point is you want to assign a permanent address and a name to your system before you install the roles. Okay? Before you install the DHCP and DNS role, it needs to have a permanent network address and it needs to have a name. Your system needs to have a name, not some gobbledygook random assigned name that Windows does when you install it. When you look at your server, your screen's going to look different. It's going to look like the server management screen here. It'll be local server, and you click on that, and then it'll show you the local values. Are there any questions about that right now? So you're going to take a screenshot of this, and that's going to help you in your planning for what you do for the solution for your server. Because now you know which addresses your wireless router is assigning, and you want to assign a complementary but different range. Let's say that again, a complementary but altogether different range of addresses. So my DHCP server, you're going to see in just a minute, has created a range of addresses for assignment, and I'm configuring those all important features we were talking about a minute ago. Let's go inside here to DHCP. So when you go to the tools menu inside your server management option, you're going to see DHCP and DNS when you've installed your system. And when you get to DHCP, you're going to select, it'll look like this. And you're going to open up the IPv4 option. And under scope, you're going to create a new scope. Okay. I'm going to create a new scope. Now, I'm going to do this in addition to the one that I just created for testing purposes. So I created you saw that I had a wireless router that issued addresses from 2 to 21. So I'm going to walk through the steps that you would take to perform your solution. So now we're talking about the solution side of things. Up to this point, we were just talking about what to do for the assignment for setting up the virtual machine and adding the network roles. You add DNS and you add DHCP after it has a fixed address, and you give it a name, right? And then you're done, and you'll turn that in. And what are you turning in specifically? You're going to basically set it up so that you have DNS and DHCP on there. So you'll show a screenshot of the server manager showing the 2 roles installed, and the local server screen showing the fixed IP address, the name, the time zone, and the updates. It's really important to understand time zone. So one of the critical things about an enterprise security account management model with a domain, once you have a domain established, when you set up the domain, you can set it up old school using NT LAN Manager, or you can set it up using Kerberos. And Kerberos helps defend against a time attack. So it's really important that you set the right time zone here, and then you're going to configure something extra in the DHCP server to help keep everybody on the same time sync. Kerberos helps defeat a replay attack, okay? So Kerberos has been around a long time, but unfortunately, a lot of enterprise implementations it was developed and implemented by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And yeah, it's in its 5th version. And basically one of the advantages of Kerberos is that it's a far superior method of account management across a network. When you have a centralized enterprise security account management model, you have a domain, you have this central database of accounts and logins. And those login values, the credentials you enter across the network, the permissions and privileges are brokered by this method, this component called the TGT. Okay, it is a ticket granting ticket. That sounds a little cyclical, doesn't it? So it distributes keys, authentication keys, and these TGTs, ticket granting tickets, and essentially it encapsulates which accounts have access to which resources. And it protects these in a manner that's much more bulletproof with much better hashes. More to the point, Kerberos is time synced. It's built into the kernel or the core of the Kerberos technology, that method. Replay attacks, usually what happens is that when hackers are listening on a network, they can simply capture the characters and then replay the characters against the server to get access. This was a devastating exploit, has been a devastating exploit, and Kerberos helps defeat that because its mechanisms preclude the capability to perform a replay attack. You can also, and this is also a best practice, whenever you have privileged accounts in a Kerberos environment, if you have a authentication password that is 15 characters or longer, basically the rainbow table it would take to crack that. Does everybody know what I mean when I say rainbow table?
I know what that one is.
For me, I don't know.
So hackers, they know that passwords are not stored in clear text. Rather, the password hash is stored. And if they can capture the hash and then have a pre-calculated table of hashes based on how many characters and numbers and letters, they can basically just find the hash that matches and then they have the password. That's called a rainbow table. But if you have a privileged account that includes a password that's 15 characters or longer, the size of the rainbow table is so enormous when it's upper and lower case numbers and special characters, 15 characters or longer in combination with a Kerberos environment, basically the hash that's used and the technology and methods that are embedded here, that rainbow table has to be so large, it puts it out of range or out of reach of all but nation states. What am I saying? There might be a mafia or mob or organized crime element in the world somewhere that has a $10 million data center that has petabytes. They can, petabytes, not gigabytes, not terabytes, not exabytes, but petabytes. The rainbow table is so darn large, nobody can afford to store a table that large. Okay. So you can use group policy objects to insist that, you know, privileged accounts, division managers and domain admins and such have to have a very long password. When you use Kerberos, Kerberos is time sensitive. So what's the catch? All of your systems need to be on the same timestamp. They have to be synchronized with the same time stamp. And here's where the rubber meets the road. If I create a scope, I'm going to show you in just a second how this works. For your solution, what you're going to do, I'm going to start with 51 and go to 100. I'll create a new scope. So inside here, I'm going to right click up on the IPv4. I'm going to right click and create a new scope. And I'm going to call this test scope 2. Okay, just 2. And I'll say to demonstrate. So you can assign network criteria that basically make this, it locks down your network environment, and then Kerberos can run on top of it. Active Directory is secure and all that. So I have a 192.168. I'm using my own home address range, and I'm going to say the starting address is 50. I said 50, right? 51. It's 51 through 100. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is what you're going to do for your solution. You're going to create this and say next. Oh, it says it conflicts with an existing scope. What's the existing scope? I thought I had through 50. Let me try 100 to, I'll try 101 to 150. How's that? So I'll create a new scope. Call this test scope 2. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's giving me this error. I'm going to delete this scope and start over again. And I'm going to restart the service on this server because I just deleted the scope. I want the DHCP service to have that scope in the memory.
One quick question, getting to the DHCP page you're on, all you did was run the letters DHCP, if I remember.
No.
Oh, you did from there, okay, from Server Manager.
Yeah, once you get in Server Manager, once your server is set up, you go to Tools and you select.
Tools, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's how you'll do it. All right, so I'm in IPv4 here. I'm going to add a scope. And I'm going to call this new scope. All right, so you see, it's going to ask me if I want to enter exclusions. So I can exclude some addresses if I want to have static addresses assigned to servers. I'm going to trim this down from 8 days to 0 days and 4 hours because I want network assignments to change and refresh constantly. And then that way they can't get hijacked. Do I want to configure the scope options? You have 2 levels of scope options. You have I mean, you have two levels of options, scope options and server options. We're going to define the scope options by telling it, okay, here's the gateway I want you to use. And here's the DNS. And see, I've created a DNS. I've created a myoWncreation.net. I created a domain called myoWncreation.net. So I'm gonna say my parent domain is myoWncreation.net. And then the server name is already in here for the DNS, right? But I could type in standard server 1 because I know that's where this is. I'm going to click next. I'm going to skip WinS, that's outdated. I'm not going to use it. And I want to activate the scope now. So I'm going to say yes. Now here's the cool part. In server options, I can configure server options. And there's a general settings option and there's an advanced. You want advanced. We can set the time server. So as clients, as devices and systems receive their IP address assignment, it says, oh, you're going to get your time from down here from this time server. You can look up a time server out on the internet and use one from the internet. Open source public Ntp time servers. So you can basically look these up. ntp.org has a internet cluster of Ntp servers. So you can pick one that matches, it's a good fit for ours. I'll have a list that you can choose from. But you're going to configure the time server option. And you're going to put the server name down in the IP address name. Here's something else you're going to configure. The DNS servers. Here's something else you're going to configure. The DNS domain name. What did I just call that? My creative something or other. myoWncreation.net. So I'm going to put that in there. myoWncreation.net. What else am I going to put in here? The broadcast address. You can prevent a hacker from defining broadcast addresses or gateway addresses so that they can do man-in-the-middle attacks, right? And those are refreshed. If you have a low recycle time, basically if somebody hacks it, 2 or 3 hours later, it's been replaced again by what's on this server. It's incredibly frustrating for a hacker to spend all sorts of time to get something set up, and then 2 hours later, the refresh on the server overwrites his stuff, right? Here's a good one to set. Ntp servers, right? We just talked about that. NetBIOS over TCP/IP. You can disable NetBIOS over TCP/IP by putting that information in there. There's something else in here that's really useful too. You can define the mail servers, where people are getting their mail from, where they're getting their local web service from. There's also a simple route. I saw simple route. That's what I was looking for. Where was it? Oh, static route. So you can define static routes for each of the devices and clients as they get their IP address. If you want to channel network traffic in a certain direction, you can basically lock it down so the time can't be changed on the systems. The designated DNS servers can't be changed by hackers. The static routes are defined. Everything's locked down, right? So I'll have something real specific for you when the solution documents are posted. I'll have it broken out by criteria and what screenshots you have to have, okay? but you'll basically configure the scope options and the server options, and you will configure a unique domain address, a domain. You'll create your own notional domain for use locally, and then you'll refer to that on your DHCP. That's what we're doing for our solution. So by specifying just a simple setup, right? You get a managed switch for a couple $100. You have a single virtual machine, a low cost system that runs DHCP and DNS. You can lock down the environment that you need to use for your enterprise, for your organization, and then you can go out and apply group policy objects. Once you have the infrastructure, the network infrastructure in place, then you can apply group policy objects. Does everybody remember the local security policy window I had open that defined WSUS? Yes or no?
Not WS. What was WSUS again?
Windows Software Update Services.
Software update. Yeah, I've seen that.
No, not this one. I opened a screen like this. Then I added a snap-in. I chose local group policy object. In the domain environment, you'll be able to, I'll have a short video that I'm also going to put out with the solution. So when I post your solution, the assignment document will have a link, and I'm going to show you how, once your DNS and DHCP is in place, you can use a screen that looks like this to define the different passwords for privileged accounts in Windows settings, right? You can get security settings that have to do with passwords. In administrative templates, you have the Windows component that includes where and how you're getting your updates. It's this screen. Does everybody remember? I showed you can run a software update server locally and get updates 1,000 times faster.
Yes.
Okay. So if you do this on the domain, once you have that other stuff in place, all of the devices and clients, they know where to get this, and there's very little wiggle room for hackers to get in there and muck with this. And Kerberos keeps things secure so that even the most sophisticated replay attacks are very, they're out of reach. So that's really the last thing that we wanted to cover today. When you create a policy like this one, when you create a new policy where you set specific criteria for security measures, it's a two-step process. You create the policy and then you link the policy. That will be demonstrated in a separate video that, again, you'll have linked into the solution assignment, right? So the solution document that I'll post either later today or first thing in the morning, you'll have a little link. It'll show you a video that walks through how to do that. But you create these settings, you save it as a group policy, and then you link the policy to an organizational unit. So you create the policy and then you link it to a unit. That's all we had time to cover today. I know that we're running a little over on our class time. Were there any questions about what we've covered before we finish? Oh, by the way, in these security policies, you can also specify things like login scripts, automatic commands that run like GP update force, all that. Any questions before we clear for the class?
No,
Okay,
not for me.
well, I appreciate your patience over the semester. I know we've had some logistical challenges, but for the rest of the week, if you have any questions about completing any of the assignments or solutions, send me an email. We'll share a screen and we'll get it done together. Okay. I'll also post the first assessment tomorrow, and you'll have a chance to do the retake, and we'll have the item analysis out there by Wednesday. So if you need Thursday and Friday off, you have a clear path to exam week next week.
All right.
All right. Well, good luck on your last assessment and your final exam. Let me know if you have any questions or you run into any challenges with your solution. And have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right.
Yeah, you have a good day too.